This podcast is brought to you by the Dunfield Retirement Residence, a casually elegant retirement community located at Yonge and Eglinton in the heart of Midtown Toronto. Customized living options complement your independent, active lifestyle. Learn more at thedunfield.com.
This is Bonjour Chai, the Hanukkah, Chrismukkah, Swastika edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Montreal. I'm here with Alana Zakon in Montreal and Davis Clar in Calgary. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we're talking about symbols and stuff. Is stuff symbolic? Who knows? Where did all this Hanukkah merch come from and what does it even mean? And here I am bearing the lead, but the swastika, it may not be as sinister as you think. Is it time to rethink its place in society? We talked to Rabbi Yael Buckler and David Zvi to learn about the dreidels, ugly Hanukkah sweaters, and all the stuff that makes our holidays festive. And Reverend T.K. Nakagaki tells us about the origins of the swastika and how we should think about it today. Before we get into any of that, we want to tell you about a live CJN event, though. The launch of the winter issue of the CJN magazine is taking place in Toronto next Thursday night, December 15th at the Poslands Theatre in the Prosserman JCC. It'll be a great opportunity to meet all of your favorite CJN folks. We have a great program lined up for the evening. Admission is free. I'll be there. I cannot wait to see you all. It's next Thursday night, December 15th at Prosserman JCC. It's the launch of the Hanukkah issue of the print magazine of the CJN. Now let's get to the show right after we hear from our sponsor.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
So for those of you who think that the swastika was the product of some graphic designer toiling away in the basement of their Führer's headquarters and created to be the graphic face of Nazism, you're in for a surprise. The symbol we see and reflexively recoil at has its roots thousands of years ago as a sign of well-being and hope. It has been used and continues to be used by Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and many other Eastern traditions as a sacred symbol in homes and temples, and lately it has come under greater scrutiny because of the desire to maintain its sacredness and the ability to be used by adherents in public spaces. But this usage does not come without controversy, of course, and legal challenges, since it is still recognized and used as a potent symbol of hate. And the nuance of the good swastika versus Hitler's Hakenkreuz or hooked cross is lost on many people. With us to talk about this is the Reverend Dr. T. Kenjitsu Nakagaki. He is a Buddhist priest, the former president of the Buddhist Council of New York, and the author of the Buddhist swastika and Hitler's cross, rescuing a symbol of peace from the forces of hate. Reverend TK, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
Thank you.
Can you start by just telling us some of the history and symbolism behind the swastika?
So I'm originally from Japan. So first of all, for me, the swastika or the manji in Japanese words. And in Japan, of course, that came with the Buddhism. So the swastika for me means Buddhism, basically. The Buddha or the Buddhist texts and anything about the Buddhism is a swastika or the manji in Japan. So like even go to the, map, everything, like a Shinto shrine and so forth. If you see the Buddhist temple, always you see the manji or swastika on the map. The swastika appears on the chest of the Buddha, and the meaning itself is the Buddha's enlightenment, and then which is actually exactly the same way for the original swastika, possibly in Hinduism, from India. That's su means to be good actually. And then asti is like to be, so to be good. And then ka means make a noun form. So swastika means everything about the good thing, and auspicious symbol in Hindu traditions.
And when did you first know that it also became associated with Nazism and Hitler? And what was your first experience when sort of maybe that was what it was like in America, when people said, no, this is a symbol of hate. It's not a symbol of peace and prosperity for us.
We do have a distinction in Japan. Meaning, when I grew up, of course, we know which is Hitler's cross, and then which is a Buddhist symbol, because we have two words. Swastika in a good one is called manji, And then swastika shaped like Hitler's is called Hakenkreuz, or the hooked cross. And then, first of all, the turn is different, left turn versus right turn. And most of the Japanese is a left turn. And then also there's no 45-degree or tilted things, but rather kind of firm. So actually, we don't mix up.
How do you think one could try to blend these two things together, where we have a world where this is considered a very potent symbol of hatred, and a world where this is a potent sacred symbol? Do you think that there's a possibility for these two to coexist for people who have historically seen this as a very bad symbol to come to understand that in some cases it is not that intention, and that there should be some places and where this is allowed and even celebrated to be able to be put up?
Yeah, I think it's possible to make a distinction, because we make a distinction between the salt and sugar. It looks the same, but we don't mix up with those two, right? Simply looks the same.
I worked in a kitchen once, and I had a chef that made that mistake once, and it was
okay.
It wasn't a fun afternoon.
Right. So you can tell by the taste, right? So no, I think it's first of all, because it shouldn't mix up with two things, because these are two different history. Like a swastika is being at least 5,000 years or so. Even known among the Buddhists, 2,000 years we've been using as a good symbol. But then the problem is people don't teach this particular symbol, the history and so forth. And because one of the reasons that this swastika become popular, or Hitler or everybody else start using, is because of the 19th century. Henry Schliemann, went to the Troy excavation, and then they found one symbol, swastika, many places, all over the place. They asked for the linguists and so forth. And then that was introduced as a symbol, which is connecting to the East and West. It's a wonderful symbol. It's like there are 4 L's, love, light, life, luck, is the way that then they introduce. And then during the wartime, of course, they start using as the actually cross. It's not the swastika is nothing to do with the cross. But the anti-Semitism is something to do with a cross. So when you say hooked cross, Hakenkreuz, that's a cross. But in terms of Eastern tradition, swastika itself is always nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It's not a cross.
So in your community, have you struggled with outside people assuming that they are the same thing personally? Is that something that your own community that you've lived through have experienced? Because I think that the biggest missing piece, and I hear you and I hear the history, but when you have people that they can't distinguish the difference, how do you make sure that both communities are getting what they need, and you have the original version that's completely different and it means peace, but then there's this other thing?
I understand. Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Because I have been the other way around, meaning first, when I came to the United States, when I encountered the first swastika is the one that I was preparing the Buddha's birthday, and then I make swastika shape with a flower. Then the members came say, "Oh, this is not Japan. You can't use this here because this means Hakenkreuz, basically Hitler's cross." So then that's the time actually I realized, oh, this is the United States, so we shouldn't, and then plus I don't want to make people feel, hurting or feel very, stressed. Hate, whatever the feeling, bad feeling about that. So what I did was actually, after that particular incident, I started learning more of the detail of the, Holocaust incidents and everything, and history. And so this is a important lesson that I should know, that, in this country, I shouldn't use swastika, because if you use it, people feel uncomfortable. So I haven't used it for actually 25 years.
But I'll pose this to everyone here on the panel right now too. My mind immediately thinks, okay, if we're going to introduce this peaceful symbol to the larger public, I immediately think that some neo-Nazis are going to co-opt this message and sort of say, no, this isn't a hate symbol. It's peace, it's beautiful. But there's, and they're still hiding behind what they want to accomplish, their goals of racism or anti-Semitism.
That's like a wicked mind. But then that one for me, I went to the lecture, Interfaith Gathering on a Hate Crime, sponsored by Interfaith Center of New York. And then we have some expert came and then talk about different things. And then one of the speaker, the so-called expert of the speakers said, swastika is a universal symbol of evil. And then I simply asked the question, what do you mean by universal symbol of evil? Here we have Hindu, Buddhist, Native Americans. We use the symbol as a good meaning. Why do you say that's a universal symbol of evil? I mean, I understand, right? Like if it's a West, that's fine. I mean, that's the way that I feel because, global community, globalization we're talking about, we should be able to respect other culture. What do they mean? They don't know anything but evil swastika. That if even some people went to the other country like Asia, even then they see the swastika, stuff. But then they say, oh, you can't use this, because this is the bad symbol and stuff like that. They start talking about. But then, that's not really nice to be able to do that because it is the disrespect to the other culture. So in one way, what I'm trying to bring is just simply the dialogue. It's not, I don't deny what happened and it has been used. Many things are used before. So that's why I need to know also that, how can it be possible to, fix it or to be able to understand and communicate. Well, if it's purely think of the symbol itself, how the symbol can be seen really. I mean, it's like all four places connected. 4 seasons, 4 elements of the universe. This is actually shape of the universe, actually, the galaxy. So it's actually the symbol of the light for many, many human beings also. And then but just understanding that itself is actually, for me, is a very important thing. And then plus, Hitler never said swastika, first of all. That's only translation, okay? So he always said Hakenkreuz. And the swastika is totally different things. So that's why first of all, words, sometimes, words doesn't matter, but the words really matters. That's why you can have a sugar versus, salt, right? For the same one. So first of all, what my suggestion is really like when you see the swastika as an evil kind of way they use, actually that has to be called Hakenkreuz or hooked cross. Never call swastika that way. The swastika is a good symbol because, by definition, su means good, as I said. It's a Sanskrit term. Sanskrit is a word that you're using it. And then it should belong to Sanskrit people who speak. So, that you don't want it messed up with the other people's language. So first of all, for me, is make a clear distinction. And then so that way, maybe you can start seeing
Reverend TK,
differently.
thank you so much for being with us here today. We'd love to hear what you thought. Drop us a line at bonjour@thecjn.ca and give us your thoughts. Over the past week alone, I have been in all sorts of regular stores, not Judaica stores, not stores that sell Jewish books or anything like that, or Jewish grocery stores like Indigo, Winners, and stuff like that. I have encountered the following items: mugs with the phrases Joy Vey and Let's Get Lit, a greeting card with Falalalalatke on the front, a mini waffle maker that presses an image of a dreidel into your waffle, and with Boom Shaka Latka printed on the box. And of course, this being Hanukkah, a scented candle with the Festival of Lights on the label, and an approximate burn time of 56 hours, which is far too long for use as a shamash, far too short for 8 whole days. Where did all this Hanukkah merch come from? More importantly, what does it all mean? right? Is it just more late-stage capitalism? Is it simply trying to drown out Christmas? Is there something kosher we can derive from all of this chazarai? Joining us are two individuals, each with their own connection to Judaism's material culture and hopefully with some insights into all of these products. Rabbi Yael Buckler is a rabbi at the Leffel School in White Plains, New York, and the founder of Midrash Manicures. And David Tzvi Kalman is scholar-in-residence and director of new media at the Shalom Hartman Institute and the owner of Printocraft Press and KLMN OPS, both of which put out Judaica in physical form. Yael, David Tzvi, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
I have to comment on how Yael showed up wearing a sweater that has little Chanukias on it and Magen Davids and has two Chanukiot behind her. You're very prepared for this theme.
For Hanukkah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how we got to where we are now, Yael? I know you wrote about this. So give us a little history. How did we get from giving gelt that was money to giving gelt that is like the Jewish version of a Christmas present?
So we have a lot to thank the advertisers for in helping to elevate Hanukkah in America. In the early 20th century, advertisers placed English and Yiddish advertisements in different Jewish newspapers across the United States. And early on, these advertisements were encouraging Jews to buy gifts for Hanukkah. Initially, it was a deal. You know, if you buy this much coffee, you'll get, some sugar or some toys for Hanukkah. Eventually, there was even a 1920 ad in the forwards that was for dental cream. Get dental cream for Hanukkah. That was actually dental cream for kids. The same advertisement was promoting perfume for Hanukkah for grown-ups. So.
Everybody wants dental cream for Hanukkah.
Exactly. So we saw a shift in the early 1900s, and American Jewish immigrants, they came to the country with some ritual items from the old country, but those were dated in terms of decor. And so a lot of Jewish Americans wanted to find modern ways to bring Hanukkah into their home. And before you knew it, by the time of the birth of the millennial generation, of which I am a part, there were a lot of Hanukkah toys for kids. And since then, it's just exploded, the market.
That's so fascinating. I didn't know any of that. I'll say that I feel like this is part of a story about how, everyone knows that Hanukkah has been deeply influenced by Christmas and how the holiday of Hanukkah is actually relatively minor and it's kind of grown up and all the gifts and all it's all connected to Christmas. Like, that's an old story. I think what people don't realize is that process of Hanukkah kind of coming into alignment with Christmas is actually still happening. And it's not, there are products that exist this year, like this year there's the mitzvah mousse, some ridiculous thing that I'm sure Yael knows more about than I do, that reflects the fact that American and Canadian relationship to Christian societies, secular societies, kind of continuing to change. And as there are more intermarried families who are trying to celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah together, as there are maybe a non-Jewish parent who is trying to figure out how do I also educate my kids about Judaism at the same time. Like, they're looking for ways of doing something within Judaism that looks more like what they're familiar with within Christianity. So it's a kind of developing process, and it has certainly not finished. I don't know if you remember a few years ago. Well, actually, this is a Canadian podcast, so this is probably not relevant. But there was a year when Hanukkah intersected with Thanksgiving instead of Christmas, and it was a totally different vibe. And it's never going to happen again, and I kind of regret that.
Can I just bring up the elephant in the room, or maybe the mitzvah mousse in the room? Of the fact that Hanukkah is commemorating a holiday that's about fearing assimilation. Can we talk about that for a second? Because there are so many Jews that I know that are very unaffiliated, and Hanukkah is like the only thing that they do. And I don't know if it ever occurs to them what they're actually celebrating. How does that fit into this whole thing?
But also violent nationalism, too.
And violent nationalism. They were rebels. They were, extremists, the Maccabees. And we teach little kids, be a Maccabee. I think there's just so much to unpack here.
Yael, do you want to tackle those questions?
Sure. And then
Thanks.
I definitely want to jump back to Thanksgiving because I do think that year, 2013, was a significant turning point in Hanukkah merchandise. So the Talmud has a lot to say about Persume Nisa, publicizing the miracle. And I think that that fits perfectly into the Hanukkah landscape, that it is a mitzvah to find ways to publicize the miracle. But I think that all of this merchandise enhances that theme that we see in the Talmud. So it's not just about, the Maccabees, but there's also another piece to the Hanukkah story. And I would also add that I think Hanukkah already really reinvented itself in America, and I imagine in Canada as well, up to the 90s. At this point, we're seeing a very strange turn in terms of what the holiday is becoming, and the merchandise offerings associated with it. But I think that really by the 90s, we saw the first Hanukkah displays in department stores were the late 80s, early 90s. So it really brought it mainstream. Prior to that, it was typically in Sfarim stores or Judaica shops or gift shops as part of synagogues. But by the 90s, pre-Instagram and pre-TikTok, it was doing pretty well. But I do think there was a significant turning point in the direction of the holiday in terms of this concept of Jewish identity and pride once Thanksmukkah happened in the States. And at that time, we saw this sudden rise of fast fashion, Jewish fast fashion. And it happens that Thanksmukkah coincided with the rise of e-commerce. So those were definitely two forces working at the same time. But we saw thousands of T-shirts sold with the Thanksmukkah logo on it. And it was this new concept of purchasing for a holiday that had never existed before. There had been some socks. There had been some ugly sweaters, not too many. But suddenly there was an opportunity in the marketplace, and I do think that served as a turning point. And since Thanksmukkah's occurrence, we have seen every possible accessory in the Hanukkah marketplace, including this year for lizards. Very exciting.
Oh my God, I saw it last week. We have a lizard. I'm trying to get my hands on this for our pet lizard.
It was very controversial.
I have one. I'm happy to hand it over to you.
Instagram was not sure how to feel about that lizard. David Zvi, I really want to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think about the shift in the merchandise? Is this good or bad for the Jews?
In general, I think it's kind of neutral. People want to buy things, they can buy things. I will say that I'm a little bit complicit in this, in part because I am a manufacturer of Judaic items, and Hanukkah is my favorite holiday because I love making dreidels. It's my favorite Jewish object of all, in part because it's so versatile, because there's so many ways to make a random number generator. A few years ago, I decided to make this thing called a 20-sided dreidel. It's like the kind of thing you would see in the Dungeons and Dragons game where you have the same 4 letters of the dreidel, but iterated 5 times each so that it functions statistically exactly like a dreidel. I couldn't have made that if it was harder to manufacture things in China, but these days it's actually pretty simple. And it's simple for even like a random person like me who doesn't have like an infrastructure, doesn't have any formal connections to China. So I think the barrier to entry for creating objects like this also has had an impact in the development of the culture.
So actually, if I can jump in there, I think that what you're creating and Elle, what you're creating as well, I think, in a large part of the types of stuff that you're doing, for example, with Midrash manicures, is fundamentally different than what we think of as like Hanukkah merch, which is here is an object and I'm going to recast it because I can think about it in a deeper way. Here is something that I can provide to the Jewish community that will make them rethink or think deeply about the object in which they are engaging with, as opposed to, like I said, a waffle maker that says, boom shaka latke. We're not talking about a latke maker here. It's a waffle maker. So there's something fundamentally different about that, as opposed to this value neutral or even value negative stuff that's coming from China that is designed just to like say, hey, we're having a Hanukkah party. We need to throw a ton of stuff on the tables. How do we do that in a way that like is cheap and easy and is bright and blue and white? And so I was wondering if maybe you can comment on that type of merch as opposed to, something which is thoughtfully crafted and designed, even if it's made in China, but is designed to make you think.
Well, prior to Jewish fast fashion and a number of Jewish small businesses really cropping up in the past decade, there were wholesale Judaica, distributors, and they had been making Designs, some of which definitely need an update. We see a lot of blue and white, and those are still sold in many national chains. But this year we're seeing the Rugrats. They have Target made, or Nickelodeon sold at Target sweatshirts with Rugrats Hanukkah episode on them. We see classical Disney figures on other clothes that are being sold at Target. We see, anything that could potentially be considered nostalgic for millennials is selling. That's actually why I made splatter paint themed pajamas, because I loved spin art as a kid. But again, there is this piece of when you walk into a store and you see Hanukkah displayed, there's a piece of you that feels a connection to your Jewish identity, even if you don't purchase it.
I'm going to push back on that.
There's still something special.
I'm going to push back on that. I know multiple people, which I will not name, myself included to some extent, depending on the context, who will walk by that kind of display and feel like grossed out and like, oh my God, they're just trying to like rope us into all of those other things. Hanukkah is like one of the least important holidays. Why has it become so commercialized? Like last year, I wrote a column about this exact theme because we were talking about Hallmark Jewish movies, which are becoming thankfully a little more Jewish, but last year were not as Jewish. And at the local grocery store in my neighborhood at the time, which was like a pretty Jewish part of Toronto, they had a Christmas tree, and underneath it, they had like a Happy Hanukkah wrapped gift. And I was like, there is so much wrong with this. And I can't help but think, like, as people who make this type of merchandise, and it sounds like your intentions are very like pure and really to get people to like be excited about Jewish in a very raw and Jewish way. But when we think about that other type of merchandise, it's creating what could become the future of Judaism for many people. Like I once had a roommate who his only connection was like his Hanukkah dinner with his family, is an interfaith family, and he had like the ho-ho Hanukkah or whatever those types of sweaters are. And he was like, what do you mean? Hanukkah is like exactly like Christmas because it's this big dinner and it's this big this. And I was like, I haven't really done a big Hanukkah dinner with my family since I was a child. Like I'll go to a party if I'm invited to one, but like I definitely don't see it as like the pinnacle of my whole Jewish identity. So there's a lot of responsibility there. And to me, that makes me a little bit nervous if we're only putting our focal point on this one holiday as opposed to all of them and not even keeping it as our own. Then it becomes like this commercialized thing and less about the actual holiday.
Well, this brings us back to authentic merchandise versus what I think is inappropriate merchandise. And this year, more than ever, there is a significant and disturbing increase in the number of items that are sold as, and I put in quotation marks, for Hanukkah, that are not for Hanukkah. I've been to about 30 stores in the past 3 weeks with the sole intention of seeing what Hanukkah offerings they have, and last night reached a new level. Last night I was in a national retailer, and one of the main parts of their Hanukkah display was a Happy Hanukkah Christmas tree light up ceramic ornament.
I gotta say, but this stuff, I don't know, this stuff doesn't bother me at all, because in a way, when I see a piece of Judaica that I have no connection to, that feels like, oh my God, like this was certainly not intended for me, and I don't even recognize the kind of person who this is intended for, that actually makes me feel good, because it makes me feel like the Jewish community is larger than just the people who I know. Maybe you feel like this also. I often feel like I know all the Jews. Like I know everybody. It's the same people. Like it's a sitcom. Like I just keep going back to the same people over and over again. And like that feels very constricting. And when I see a piece of Judaica that actually I don't relate to at all, it makes me feel like, oh, I'm actually part of this like larger society that has these totally different elements. No, I was going to say, like, what I compare it to is there is a report by the Chida in the I think the 18th century, who wrote this travelogue. He kind of traveled around collecting money for Israel all over the place. He traveled to all kinds of different countries. I think he travels to India at some point. And he goes to India and he meets these people and he's like, are you Jews or are you something else? Like they're so far from any experience of Judaism he's ever had that he can't even tell if they're Jewish or not. And like, that's actually kind of powerful. Like there's something powerful about having a culture, having a religion that is so broad and so varied that you almost can't recognize different aspects of it.
So I'd like to push back a bit. I think that some of the merchandise that we're seeing this year that I really do believe is truly inappropriate, I don't want to see that as Hanukkah of the future. And I know that once it's on the shelves, there's no place to go but shopping carts. So I do hope that retailers make better decisions, ideally by next week, by removing the merchandise. But if not, then by next year. And I'm just so tired of seeing Hanukkah gnomes and Hanukkah advent calendars and Hanukkah stocking hangers. I didn't even know what a stocking hanger was.
I want to jump in here and sort of say, as someone who lives in Calgary, I can't even find Hanukkah candles in Calgary, let alone a mensch on the bench. Where could someone who wants to purchase stuff, ethical Jewish stuff, maybe made by Jews, designed by Jews, shipped by Jews, arriving at your Jewish doorstep, where can I go to find these Hanukkah gifts?
So there's a website, moderntribe.com, and I believe they ship to Canada as well. And they really support a lot of small businesses and Jewish artists. And David Tzvi, I believe you also have some items with them as well. They sell my merchandise too. And it's sort of, I consider it a little bit like a Jewish Etsy.
This has been great conversation. Yael, David Tzvi, thanks so much for coming on. I hope we can get you guys back on this next summer to discuss the dearth of like Tisha B'Av merch and how we can rectify that. So maybe we can have that conversation then.
Sounds great.
Now it's time in the show for our Nachas of the Week, that thing that makes us feel newish, Jewish, goodish over the past week. David, what's your Nachas this week?
Okay, so by now you both know, and I'm sure much of our listenership knows, my love of sports. Of all things sporting.
Yes, of course.
Yes. So what is the biggest sporting event happening right now?
Oh, it's definitely not FIFA World Cup.
Wrong person.
It is definitely the World Cup in Qatar. And I just thought, aside from all the terrible human rights violations that have led to the death of thousands of migrant workers, its terrible record for queer rights, and a host of other problems, I thought, let's have some Jewish pride for all the Jews playing on and off the field. So I want to give a shout out, a nachas out, to Matt Turner. Matt Turner is a New Jersey native. His father is Jewish. His mother is Catholic, but he identifies more with the Jewish traditions. And Turner's teammate on defense is DeAndre Yedlin. He is a Seattle native who was raised Jewish, but also practices Buddhism. And Yedlin, if you've been watching, actually has a large Hebrew tattoo on his right shoulder in honor of his great-grandparents. Now, are you familiar, with the very famous, the long goal calls called goal?
Yes.
Have you heard that? You've
Yes.
heard that, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
who do you think came up with that? Who was the original creator for that expression?
He is the Chazan himself, the Ur-Chazan.
The Ur-Chazan indeed, named Andres Cantor, an Argentinian Jewish announcer who popularized this famous tradition. He also is a 6-time Emmy Award winner, and he is joined by one of his mentees, 2-time Emmy nominee Sami Sadovnik, who has been with Telemundo since 2007 and covered sports since 1989. He is also a proud Jew from Peru who actually visits Israel every year. So I am giving all the nachases out to all these wonderful Jewish superstars in Qatar. Get home safe.
You should hear this cantor sing the Musaf, right? He goes, Kadosh, Kadosh. It takes like an hour to get through the Kedusha, but that's a different story.
He needs to do
Alana,
that during FIFA.
what is your nachas?
Okay, this might be one of my favorite nachases ever. The Forward posted this on their Instagram. Now that we have this new technology, the OpenAI ChatGPT, they decided to test the chatbot and put it to the test by asking it to create the plot of some Hanukkah movies. I'm going to read out loud one of them. They posted a bunch of them on their Instagram, and if you are in the need of a laugh, I highly recommend checking it out. So this one, they wrote to the AI, write me a synopsis of a Hallmark holiday romantic comedy about Hanukkah involving a time-traveling Maccabee who visits the future. This is what the bot wrote. In the year 165 BC, Judah Maccabee and his army are celebrating their victory over the Greek army and the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. However, as the festivities come to an end, Judah is mysteriously transported to the future, where he finds himself in the midst of a modern-day Hanukkah celebration. At first, Judah is confused and disoriented by the strange new world he finds himself in, but with the help of a kind-hearted young woman named Rachel, he begins to adjust to his new surroundings. As they celebrate Hanukkah together, Judah and Rachel discover that they have a very strong connection. However, their relationship is complicated by the fact that Judah is a time traveler and must eventually return to his own time. Despite the challenges that they face, Judah and Rachel are able to find love and happiness during Hanukkah. In the end, Judah returns to his own time, but not before leaving a lasting impact on the future and reminding Rachel of the true meaning of Hanukkah: hope, resilience, and the power of faith. A bot wrote that. How weird is that?
Love it. I love it.
I think the most plausible thing about this is that the bot understands that you cannot have a Jewish rom-com without the female protagonist named Rachel.
Check it out, people. It's good fun.
All right. So my nachas this week is that I was driving on the Dakari Expressway and I drive by a massive piece of graffiti, and the massive piece of graffiti actually says Jew Lives Matter. There's a drawing of Kanye being like punched, and it's like "Shut up, Kanye" or something. I did a little digging. Turns out it is actually somebody that I know. I will not give out his real name. He is a famous graffiti artist in Montreal. He goes by the name Aper, A-P-E-R. You can check out his Instagram at Aperism. There's a picture of the piece up there. It is beautiful. I'm not going to get into what the symbolism behind this or not, because if we think that White Lives Matters is a problem, maybe Jew Lives Matters is, I don't know. I see Alana also kind of going, maybe, but it's a beautiful piece. I like it. I think that it actually means well, and it is, go check it out. I think that public graffiti sometimes, often is a great idea. On a melancholy note, before we leave you for the week, it brings me no pleasure to announce that this is the last week for the current lineup of Bonjour Chai. Alana and David are busy cooking something up for the CJN. I cannot wait to hear about it. I am sure it will be amazing. I will miss our weekly get-togethers, our loving disagreements, our impromptu sing-alongs. David will be here next week, so let's save our farewells for him until then. But Alana, this is your last week. Do you have any memories you want to share? Any ideas?
Well, I can't help but think back to like before all of this started. And I think we talked about this story in one of our year recaps in the past. But I remember when Avi called me up and I had never met him before. We talked on the phone. I was living in Vancouver and pitched the idea of the show to me. I'd never done a podcast. And this is like my biggest confession, which I don't know if I've ever made on the show. I had listened to one podcast ever before getting on Bonjour Chai. I now listen to many more. No, it didn't exist. Bonjour Chai didn't exist.
She was a time-traveling host of podcasts. She traveled into the future to hear all these episodes.
Yeah. No, it was actually David Tennant does a podcast. And I listened to it on a long bus ride, and I was like, I understand why people kept telling me that I would probably really like podcasts. But anyway, I now listen to many podcasts, and it was a big learning curve. It was a whole different ball game. We had Melissa on the show. I was like really scared about if I was able to vocalize my opinions. And so for me, it's been a really big learning curve just on a personal note to be able to break free of that. To be able to express my opinions more freely, to learn a lot. I have talked to so many incredible and interesting people from all over the country and out of the country over these, I don't know, how long has it been? 2 years? Almost every single week. And, it's been very educational and has definitely opened me up a lot as a person. And I'm very grateful for the time that I had on the show. And I'm very excited to continue doing this podcast journey. David and I are working on an arts podcast. That's all we're going to say for now, but hopefully we'll be able to come back on some point in the new Goyish year to maybe give a little trailer, to give a little sneak peek to what we're cooking up. But we're not going anywhere, so fear not. If you enjoyed listening to David and I, we're going to utilize all of our artistry and bring you something different.
Alana, we are so going to miss you. You guys, you automatically have a carte blanche. You are on anytime you want, anytime you have something to share.
right.
Please do come back on the show. We are going to miss you. David, we'll save our goodbyes for next time. But
Sounds good.
until then, we will see you soon. I will see you in Shul, Alana.
See ya in Shul.
And that's about it. Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending December 10th, Shabbat Parashat Vayishlach. The show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcasts is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. Of course, as always, it is one of the best ways we get new listeners. And of course, you can email us. Please do email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. For the last time as a team, I'm Avi Feingold.
I'm Ilana Zakon.
And I'm David Sklar.
The Dunfield Retirement Residence offers customized living options to complement your independent, active lifestyle. Welcome home. Welcome to the Dunfield. Visit us at thedunfield.com to book a personal tour.